California requirements for the supervisor training course. And so I'd like to have this be as interactive as possible. Feel free to ask questions. I'd like you to ask comment and make your comments and things as we go today. So now, how many of you have all of you been trained in harassment before?
Yeah.
Has anyone not been trained?
Just the 20-minute training.
Okay. And besides, I know that Christina, who else attended recently with the harassment training that we put on for all of the employees? Oh, okay.
Chris was
okay,
bad.
So all of you. Okay. So I'll go through this this part of the training relatively quickly because some of this is repeat for you then, but it is important. It's helpful to kind of re-talk through the issue of what is harassment. We talked before with the other groups when we went through is that our workforce is really made up of a lot of people with different backgrounds. When we look around ourselves in the room and we see there's a lot of people that we have similarities, but we have a lot of differences. There's a lot of differences that come into play in the workforce.
Sorry about that, Ken.
No, that's okay. When we look at some of the differences that if you look around the room, there's probably differences. It could be differences in color of skin, cultures, national origins, marital status, education, values, priorities, age, gender, religious beliefs, maybe not sexual preference in a small group, but often in larger groups there may be sexual preference issues, hairstyle, length, clothing, tattoos, body piercing, just lots of stuff that's different. We all come from different backgrounds and have different life experiences. We have different parents, different schoolings, upbringings, things that form our personality, things that form the way we see the world and the way we perceive things and what we like or don't like. And so with that, all of that comes together, it develops to where we begin to form our own attitudes and bias and prejudice and such. That's how we see the world. Sometimes some of us look at something like a certain hairstyle, for example, and we're going to go, wow, that's really weird. I do not like that. And any of the other number of things. There's some things of these differences that we can control. And for those of you who were in the discussion before, give me an example of what some difference I can control.
My hygiene.
Yeah, I can control. What was the last comment?
My tattoos, I don't care who doesn't like them.
Okay. So I could control whether or not I have tattoos.
Mm-hmm.
I can control. I heard the comment hygiene. So whether I shower or take care of myself or wear clean clothes or what kind of clothing I wear, the way I wear my hair, all of that. Those are things within my control. Right. So things I can't control. What are some examples of that?
Ginger.
Ginger's a spice.
Gender.
Yeah, and they actually have surgeries for that kind of thing nowadays too. Where some of them are changing their gender successfully. So, but
I can't change my mama or my papa.
That's correct.
There you go. Can't change my parents. Although there are kids that have been able to successfully divorce their parent. Resolve separate from parents. But as a general rule, you're right. I can't change my color of skin, my parents, my background, whatever it may be. Those are things that are out of my control. There are physical things that some of us can't control. I may have may be blind. I may be missing a limb. I may have some physical disability. I may have some mental challenge disabilities. Maybe I'm ADHD, or maybe I'm, there's different things that just come with us that comes with the package that, hey, I didn't sign up for this, but guess what, I got it, and here's how I am. So again, we roll in all of those differences, and we get a lot of attitudes and things that are different about us. And the way we respond and resolve those differences can make whether we have a great, positive, productive work environment or make to where we got a pain in the neck and challenges going on. Because a lot of times people will complain about the differences, oh, I can't believe so-and-so's like that, or oh, they're doing this, I can't believe that. We may narrow someone out, and insult them, tease them, give them a bad time. Maybe we don't resolve conflicts very well with those individuals. We argue with them, we make threats, fights, attacks, all of these kinds of negative things that goes on. And I mentioned that that has a big impact on the work environment. We've all been around people. What happens when you get just one really negative person that you're working around or working with in the whole work environment? What happens to everybody else?
Makes it bitter.
Yeah, it does. It's just like the old sour apple in a basket, so to speak, where it just kind of impacts everybody. It brings everybody down. I had one organization where there was a conflict between two employees, and that conflict, now this is a little company where they, a lot of them were interacting daily, but 25, 30-person company, but it impacted the entire company. Just between those two, they started developing coups and backbiting and rumors and things going on throughout the company, and before they were done, I mean, it was like they were ready to fire both of them, and it just created a real problem for the organization. So as leaders, sometimes we have to really step up and make sure we're looking for and resolving these kinds of problems and challenges, and make sure that we're setting a good example ourselves in how we're resolving challenges and problems and such, so that we're keeping on top of these things so they don't fester. Well, and this leads to the biggest form of disrespect and challenge that we run into in the work environment, which is harassment in and of itself. So our real focus today and the focus of our training will be on what is harassment, what does it look like, how do we identify it, and we'll have a lot of emphasis as supervisors, what's your role related to helping to prevent harassment in the environment. Part of that is making sure we're really clear about what it is too, because you're the ones that's going to be helping train others and to help identify and eliminate it in the work environment. But we want to make sure that we're not harassing and that we're not allowing harassment that's going on in the environment. We want to make sure that we're personally responding to any complaints. We'll talk about kind of the complaint process and your role and what we want you to do. And we'll define that reporting process, and I think everybody's probably already clear about most of these things I've already listed here. The bottom line is the goal here is we want to create a great place to work and a great work environment. Well, I asked the others in the training, and I know most of you have been through this as well, except for Chris, as you mentioned, but to think of a time when you felt humiliated, embarrassed, demeaned, anxious, or afraid. Take just a second, and I apologize for those of you who have gone through this already. This is so the first part of this will be a little bit of repeat, but we'll be tying in more of the supervisor things as we go here. So, but think about that time for just a moment. And I don't know, for some of us, maybe it happened last week. Hope not. But if it might have been for you, it may have happened yesterday. Others, we may have to think back to when we were in grade school. We had some bully or someone that picked on us, or something that was going on that was just really made us really feel demeaned, humiliated, and anxious and upset. And then picture yourself, and I won't have you share your specific story. We all know those hard times that we went through. Picture if you had to come to work every day feeling like that, feeling that humiliation, that embarrassment, anxiety, fear, and coming to work 8, 10 hours a day, however long you work, and having that feeling. Or maybe there's someone at work that every time they come by that you feel that, and you're like, or you go through the day hoping you don't run into that person. Well, that's what people who are going through and experiencing harassment often feel. Some of them feel that type of pressure and challenge every day. And that's why it's so critical that we eliminate harassment-type behaviors or these tensions and problems in the workplace. All right, so you've all had the training, or you've all had harassment training before. What is it? Who can tell me what harassment is?
Anything that makes you feel uncomfortable.
Okay.
Judging, bullying.
Feeling judged for who you are.
Being stared at because you're sexy, like me.
That's a real challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, Lordy.
We're going to put it to the test this Friday, too.
Okay.
You're welcome to come.
I'd love that. So what else? What else might harassment be?
Chris?
I mean,
There were a couple of comments I wanted to revisit. One of the first comments someone made was anything that makes you uncomfortable.
Right.
So it's anything that makes you uncomfortable if it's not work-related type things that make you uncomfortable. And I clarified that in the other two groups too, because sometimes there's actually three groups. We ended up putting it on 3 times. Sometimes there's a challenge that, and also the comment about being or feeling judged. If you're being and feeling judged because of your color of skin, national origin, your age, your weight, height, sexual preference, that kind of stuff, or if you're being treated differently because of all of that kind of stuff, yes, that's harassment, and that's the kind of thing we have to stamp out. If you're being judged because of performance, if you're being made uncomfortable because you're not meeting expectations and supervisors are giving you feedback and coaching and guiding and helping you to make improvements, that's not harassment. Those are job-related things, and sometimes as supervisors we have times where employees might do something that we become upset. We hope that we handle it professionally and we're calm and we don't raise our voice, but sometimes we do. And if we do, that's also not harassment. That's part of doing business or running business. I say that tongue in cheek, but at the same time, we want to try and not do too much of the yelling and screaming, but I just want to make sure. Sometimes people get confused about that. I can't tell you how many times I've had complaints of harassment, and someone, and it's just because of they're being held accountable, and someone's coaching and giving them feedback, and they're going, oh, this is making me feel uncomfortable, and I'm feeling judged, and so I'm being harassed. So I emphasize what is and what is not as we go through this too. Questions or comments about that?
No.
Okay, good. So any unwanted persistent behavior, non-job related type things, that's intimidating, annoying, troubling, tormenting, offensive, threatening, disturbing, humiliating, all of those things are, add to this definition. Conduct is directed at a person, causing substantial emotional distress, and here's the key, serves no legitimate business purpose. So again, so there are times when we have to deal with things that are hard and make people uncomfortable, but if they're job related, that's different than, sometimes our job's stressful. We have to deal with hard customers, hard coworkers, and whatever, and and that's just part of doing business. But when there's no legitimate business purpose. All right, well, let's go into some different, we'll revisit some of the different forms of harassment. So what's an example of verbal harassment?
harsh language, cursing.
Okay, that could be. Depends on the language, and I mentioned in the last training session that as a general rule, it's a good idea to avoid such things as, say, dropping the F-bomb. And are we going to be sued? Is it going to be viewed that we're harassing environment just because we swear? Probably not. Just in and of itself. But if there's a lot of discussions of sex, if we're a lot of F-bombs and a lot of other things, but those things could create an uncomfortable work environment for someone else. And so we have to look at this through both eyes. Not only do we want to comply with the law, but we also want to create a good, productive, positive work environment too. So if the kinds of cursing and things that we're doing, if we're offending others, maybe if you're taking someone else's deity's name in vain, whatever their religious group, and so for example, if someone's Christian and someone takes the name of Jesus Christ and uses it in a vain term, that might be very offensive to someone else of that religious group. And so, so we kind of have to step back sometimes and look at what kind of words do we use in our everyday discussions with others. There's a lot of other examples. Could be suggestive comments. If we're maybe we're the jokester and we make sexual innuendos and things of that nature, and we continually do that kind of thing. We may be creating a hostile work environment that way. A lot of sexual flirtation, and I mentioned when we had the other classes, we don't have a problem if somebody wants to ask someone else on a date. As an organization, we're not trying to regulate who dates who and what their relationships are. We do ask that you as supervisors don't date anyone that you supervise or have sexual relations with anyone that's under your direction. And if you get a relationship that's developed, bring that to the attention of senior management so that we can make changes. Maybe we need to transfer someone or whatever, because we don't want to create that conflict of interest or have that situation that might lead to problems.
Yes, that would be a big problem.
So when might it become a problem with somebody asking somebody out on dates?
When they're clearly not interested.
Louis know about that.
No, I don't.
Yeah. So if somebody's asked someone out, and they said, hey, I'm not interested. So they have to be careful. It's risky dating somebody at work, period. But if you're going to date or ask or pursue someone, make sure you don't overdo it. So if you've asked somebody out and they've said no, probably a good sign to back off. If you ask them twice and they've said no twice, definitely back off, and don't continue other pursuing too. Like flirting with them at lunch and, hey, looking real nice today, or bringing them gifts and flowers and that kind of thing. Those can all be examples of somebody that's crossing the line and becoming harassing. Okay, we talked derogatory jokes, and we all love a good joke, and there's nothing wrong with telling appropriate jokes. But jokes dealing with age, religion, national origin, sex, all of those kinds of jokes are not appropriate for the workplace. And I don't know about you, for me that kind of eliminates about 80% of the jokes that I know that I could tell. So we have to kind of look at 90%. Yeah, so it's so just be careful. And again, you as supervisors, people look to you and the kinds of examples that you're setting. So if you're the one telling that sexual joke or pursuing relationships at work and whatever, people look at you and then they emulate that and they say, oh, I guess it's okay, Louis is doing it, or I heard him say this, or they hear your language and so they say, okay, this is the common language of the business, it's okay to do it because this leader and this leader's doing it. So you're really held upon that higher level to make sure that you're walking the talk and being an example of all of this stuff. Right, name calling, especially name calling of, again, back to those areas, dealing with age, religion, national origin. If you're calling somebody that implies one of those kinds of names, not only is it potentially harassing, but you may imply that maybe there's discriminatory practices taking place. So we have to be careful as supervisors what kind of names and labels we might give to someone so that there's never an implication, that somebody is being treated differently or that we view them because of all of those protected categories. Not to mention, back to the comment about someone feeling judged. You know, if we're using names when we're giving feedback, you know, that's not a useful technique either. You know, like, so if someone, let's say someone is late for work, you know, and so we say, you know, you're a real slacker, you know, and you know, and so if we label them and give them a name calling, that makes them very defensive, not open to the feedback that they're arriving to work late. Instead, they're feeling attacked and judged that you just labeled them with a name. So it really doesn't work that well. You're better off to be more specific about what behavior and actions you hear and see, what are they saying, what are they doing, and talk to that as opposed to throwing a label on or name calling. Kidding or teasing, and this one again is like with jokes. You know, we all like to kid and tease a little and have fun, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with having fun at work. What's the risk and problem with teasing?
The one takes it the wrong way.
Yeah, sometimes everyone's not fully on board with it, or the person that's at the other end that's getting teased, maybe they're, you know, going back to that comment about, you know, a time when you feel humiliated and embarrassed and whatever, maybe the teasing actually is causing them to feel humiliated and embarrassed, and you're creating a hostile environment for them. Had a situation in a production organization that I was at where there was this individual. He was a real jokester. I mean, this guy was quick on his feet. Anybody would say anything, he could make a quick comment. But there was one individual that was just he was a little slow, a little bit of a misfit, and he was just a target for this guy. I mean, he could find stuff to kid and tease him on all the time, and he would attempt to try and laugh along or make comments back to this person, and this guy would just have him for lunch. And this went on for, before it came to our attention, it went on for almost a year. And this guy was just a nervous wreck. I mean, it just almost destroyed him. You know, he just, you know, before it was all said and done, we had to fire the teaser kidding person to fix the problem in the whole work environment. And you know, so we just, sometimes these things just get out of control. You know, this guy just couldn't make an adjustment. He couldn't stop doing what he was doing. He just kept badgering and hurting other people. So we've talked about obscene language already. You know, any discussions on race, gender, religion, age, sexual preference, any of those kinds of things, you know, ought to be left out of our verbal discussions at work, and they're just risky conversations.
Politics,
can
okay?
you think, yeah, politics are all right. You know, there's always those. That's one of those risky topics that may lead to a big, heavy discussion.
Harassment.
Yeah, you know, I love going to a family event and bringing up some kind of you know, talk about you know, if you can bring up religion or politics, you know, you're guaranteed, you know, and then you just step back and watch the fighting go on. You know, that's always fun to do in family reunions. All right, so we've talked about discussions of a sexual nature as well. You know, so someone, you know, talking about their last night sexual episode or going down to the strip club or whatever, you know, those kinds of things are not appropriate either. All right, how about visual conduct? What are some examples of visual harassment that might be in the workplace?
Like staring at a body part too long and getting caught.
Yeah. There you go.
You have this. That's why I know the answers. Remember, we had this last week.
There you go. So, well, and that's hard. You know, we all have something that's attractive to us. You know, and whether it's, you know, certain individuals, you know, and there's a fine line. And I've given this example: when someone walks by that's attractive to us, there's a fine line that we walk between, you know, okay, I notice that person looks nice, and I look and I get back to business and I go on. But if I glare and stare and, oh man, you know, ooh, check that out, you know, and then I'm so obvious that I'm looking, not only I may be harassing to that person that sees and notices, and by the way, they do notice. You know, you know, all this. I don't know if it's just, and I'm going to sound sexist here. Maybe it's, you know, if it's guys and women both. But sometimes, you know, we think they don't notice. we think that, oh, I'm just going to give them that double check out, and they notice. Sometimes, sometimes they like that, sometimes they don't. So because we don't know, it's always better to be careful. So, but you talked about the body part thing too. Make sure that we're giving eye-to-eye contact, not eye-to-breast contact or eye-to-buttocks contact or other body parts, that we might be staring at. So just be careful. So the leering, derogatory or sexually oriented posters, pictures, or pornography. So things we might bring up on our computer, pictures we might bring in, calendars, emails we might circulate around, anything visually that might portray individuals in skimpy clothing, nude, anything like that, male or female, we ought to leave out of the workplace. It's risky. We really shouldn't be looking at that kind of stuff in the workplace. And I don't know. Maybe you can tell me. Do we have a method where, does the company have the ability, if they want to check to see what websites people have been into?
Yeah.
Yes, and we restrict access to a lot of other websites.
Okay. So we have some blocking capabilities already, but okay, and that's helpful. I mean, especially in some of the real hardcore pornographic kinds of things that are out there, because that's really risky. If somebody brings up something on their computer, pornographic, and someone walks by and they see that, that's a strong form of hostile work environment and harassment. Could even be cartoons and funny stuff, drawings. It doesn't have to necessarily be actual real life photos. Even cartoons can, of a sexual nature or drawings, can be forms of harassment as well. So even that funny cartoon that's maybe really explicit ought to not be in the workplace either. Okay. Physical conduct. What are some, it's a lot of different things that kind of come into play here. Can you think of an example of a physical conduct that would be harassment?
Sexually bumping into someone. I had that one. Back in,
So,
no, not me personally. Someone said that an individual bumped into them sexually, and I struggled with that. How do you bump into someone sexually?
You hit check.
That could be one way. But yeah, I thought that was interesting, Ken. Someone complained that they have been sexually bumped into.
yeah, interesting. I don't know if any Seinfeld fans. Anybody in there watched Seinfeld when they went on in the series? There was an episode where George Costanza's father, he had this thing, where he would drive and he would act like he had to stop. I think he called it stopping short. So he'd hit his brakes, and then he'd take his hand over to help the person next to him so they wouldn't fall forward. But in the process, he's kind of filling them up. And so that might maybe that's an example of sexually bumping into somebody.
Okay.
But certainly in anything that someone's doing, where they're purposely, maybe they're making it look like an accident or not, but if they're touching somebody inappropriately, that could actually be a form of assault. So assault and battery, where if they're actually touching somebody. So if we're touching somebody in inappropriate areas, obviously, they may, not only would they likely be losing their job, but they could be facing criminal charges as well, assault and battery. So any offensive touching, those are all, some obvious examples and things. They're patting, pinching, striking somebody. Those are all physical conduct type things. What about rubbing shoulders? Is it okay to rub someone's shoulders?
Is your permission?
You never get permission to rub shoulders.
No, you're right.
What was that comment?
It was off the record. Never mind.
Verbal misconduct. It was verbal misconduct.
Yeah. So as long as somebody knows somebody's given permission, and so you just have to be careful, you know. So if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I've got a really sore neck, do you mind rubbing my shoulders, then that's probably okay. Or if they look like they have a stiff neck, you know, look like you have a stiff neck, would you like me to rub your neck, your shoulders or neck? Yes, please do. But don't just go up and start doing it. Don't go up and put your arm around someone. Don't go up and just start touching them. You know, high fives, handshakes, those are pretty safe, you know, because usually someone has to, you know, reach out and participate as well. What about hugging? Is it okay just to run up and grab somebody and pull them in and give them a big squeeze? Same thing there. We need to make sure we've got permission. You know, because not everybody thinks and feels the same about it, and it's probably safer too to hug sideways. You know the sideways hug. You know, it's more of kind of a pull into shoulders as opposed to pull into chest. Right. Is a safer hug. But make sure that it's okay. I shared a story. I had someone in my office. She shared some things. She cried, and I got through with our discussion. I says, "Can I give you a hug?" And she says that would be really nice. She needed a hug, and I gave her a hug, and it was great. But I made sure that it was okay. I didn't just go, you know, go grab it. Now I can do that non-verbally too. So you can't see me, but if I hold my hands kind of out and stop and wait, there's that sign that says hug. And you know, and if they don't come in, I'm left hanging, and that's okay. You know, there won't be a hug today, but if they do come in and hug, then we can hug. So I can do it non-verbally or verbally, but just make sure that you're getting they're okay before we just dive right in. Blocking someone's movement might be another form of that as well. So there's different types of threats or demands could be another form of harassment. So if somebody's being physically or verbal threats or abuse that's taking place, requiring sexual favors, there's two forms of sexual harassment. There's the quid pro quo. This is the this for that type thing. So you know, someone may be in authority, manager, supervisor, saying, "Hey, make sure you know if you do this sexual favor with me, we'll make sure you get that pay increase, or I'll get you that promotion." And I don't see that much of that kind of harassment taking place now. Sexual harassment still does a little bit in the industry, but really not that often. Still a lot of this hostile work environment. In the hostile work environment, sexual harassment deals with those things that we've just talked about. You know, it could be a visual type things, verbal type things, physical type things. It's just present overall in the work environment. Isaiah Thomas of the New York Knicks, under his direction, there was a lot of sexual harassment type things going on in the work environment years ago, and there was a $5 million lawsuit, you know, before it was all said and done. You know, very costly, you know, allowing some of that kind of stuff to prevail and to go on in the work environment. Usually, for it to be considered a hostile work environment, the conduct that's taking place has got to be severe and pervasive enough to create this overall hostile work environment. So it could be comments, conduct. Usually it's based on something, you know, like sex, race, or other legally protected characteristics. It's interfering with their workplace. It's making them feel intimidated, hostile, or offended. You know, so those are the things that tie that in. So a true appropriate, a test of appropriateness, you might ask yourself is, you know, would I say or do this if my spouse, mother, or child were here? And, you know, for some of us, you might even add in some of your religious leaders. You know, my priest, minister, bishop, whatever it may be. You know, if they were here, would I say or do this? And if the answer is no, probably I'd leave it out of the work environment too. Okay, well, anyone can commit harassment. You know, I mean, it could be a manager, employee, contractors, vendors, or guests, customers. So make sure that all of our efforts to prevent harassment in the workplace, make sure that applies in those areas too. You know, so if a customer is being inappropriate with an employee, and you overhear that, take action. You know, and there's different ways you can professionally do that without losing the customer too. You know, just you know, tactfully taking someone aside and saying, you know, hey, you know, we'd appreciate it if you wouldn't say or do that here. You know, we want your business, but we have to leave that part of it out because of our policies of this organization. Could be lots of victims that come into play. Could be anyone affected by the conduct, not just the person that's offended. You know, usually if harassment's taking place with one person, it's happening with lots of people. So it may, you know, if we allow it in our work environment in any form, it can hurt and create this negative, destructive work environment that might be there. So question, is it harassment if the alleged harasser had good intentions and didn't mean to be harassing somebody? Is it still harassment?
Yes, it is.
And so their intentions really don't matter. So even though this individual here, Joe Johnson here, real friendly guy, he greets everybody with a hug. He sees women, he comes up, he gives them a hug. He likes to give them a little kiss on the cheek, and he loves it. You know, just very touchy-feely kind of person. He doesn't mean to come across as harassing, but some individuals he may be very much causing the harassment to them. Every time he touches and hugs and gives them that kiss, they're feeling that humiliation and embarrassment and cringe every time they see him walking by. In his mind, he's like, yeah, I'm just this Mr. Friendly guy. So what we've got to do is when we get these kinds of individuals is coach and train them to help them understand what are the fine lines. You know, you need, you know, to help them understand when the hug is appropriate or the right way to do it, or maybe you know, train them to give high fives and handshakes instead. All right, so think about it yourself. Could you be contributing to a harassing environment by your actions or your words? Is there something you're doing or saying? Are you aware of something that's going on with employees that report into you that's harassing? Is there someone that maybe you need to get some coaching to that's maybe a little too much teasing or joking with other people? Maybe the jokes that they're sharing are kind of borderline or walking those fine lines. Or you know someone who's looking at questionable photos on their computer or bringing in things to work. You know, are there individuals that you maybe need to reach out and coach and talk to? You know, because we hope that we walk away from this not just checking a box saying, okay, we got our 2 hours of training in, but that we can walk away and say, how can I go make a better workplace, a better work environment, and more productive employees? Well, any harassment, whether it's based on gender, race, color, religion, national origin, age, sex, disability, any of the things we've talked about in here is strictly prohibitive at IMM and won't be tolerated. Employees can expect to be, if they engage in harassment, corrective action will take place. Could include immediate termination. And as is always our practice here at the company is we don't want anyone to terminate right on the spot. So if you have aware of some situation, you know, we want you to gather the information and bring it back to senior management and let them discuss it with you and decide the next steps from there. And, you know, so if somebody's just telling a questionable joke, a little too much teasing, that kind of stuff, those are things you ought to just handle. You know, coach them, talk to them about it, help them out. But if you know somebody has been, you know, somebody has allegedly sexually touched someone else, or there's, you know, a lot of things going on in the environment, somebody's been, you know, continually asking somebody out, and it's going on and on. Those are things that we want you to gather the information. You know, so if someone comes to you and complains, ask questions, listen, make notes, gather the information, but then we want you to bring it back to Basil and Tom and Christina and you know, and then they'll decide and discuss next actions from there. They may involve myself or Debbie Sidaway as well, and we'll just kind of work on this. these kind of really sensitive, high-risk situations, we want to make sure cooler minds prevail, that we have the facts, but you might be involved in helping us gather the information. And when you get that information, we need to keep it as confidential as possible. Don't be sharing it with other coworkers. Don't be sharing it even with other supervisors who are not involved in it. Only share that kind of information directly with the senior management team that you're working with to resolve the problem. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Chris is next.
Thoughts or comments on that?
No. I think we got it.
Awesome. All right, so what do you do if you see or experience harassment?
I don't know.
Management. Hire them, he said.
It's fine.
Oh, I just said hire them.
Sit down with them. Have a meeting. Sit down with them. Get it
Investigation.
all written down. Find out what's going on.
Investigation.
Okay. Well, and the comment about investigation, at first, so you're looking at this through two sets of eyes. I mean, if harassment's happening to you, first and foremost, you know, if you're comfortable, and we say this to employees, if they're comfortable, talk to the person about it. Hey, you've asked me out twice. I've mentioned I'm not interested. Please don't ask me out anymore. Yeah, leave it alone. Or I noticed that when I walk past that you're glaring at me, you know, or when we talk, you're looking at my breasts. You know, would you please not do that anymore? You know, I mean, it's okay to have those kinds of discussions if somebody's comfortable. If they're not, then the comment about, yeah, you know, then bring it to the attention of your supervisor or anyone in senior management would be the appropriate response. So report it to your supervisor, senior management, or HR. Christina is wearing a lot of hats, including an HR hat. Debbie Sidaway and myself, Ken Spencer, you know, we're also an extension of that. So if somebody wants to call us, they're welcome to do that too.
Gotcha.
Okay. So you as supervisors, now there was a comment about investigate. We don't want you to dive in and investigate until you've brought it back to the senior management team and make sure that they're all on board on what the next steps will be. You know, so if you see harassment going on or someone's come to you and complained in any form, gather the information, ask questions, probe. You know, what did someone say or do? When did it happen? Were there witnesses? Gather that information, and then bring it back to Christina and Tom and Basil and maybe us at senior HR service. You know, so that and then let's decide from there where do we go. Some things we may just say, hey, just talk to them. Some things we may say, we need to fire that person. Some things we may do a formal investigation where we're talking to witnesses and that sort of thing. But we want it to be, you know, back to the part of the team. Christina, have I explained that correctly? Anything you would change in what I've explained there?
She just stepped out for a second.
Okay. Gee, this really critical moment, and we missed it. So, but I'm pretty sure that's on there. You know, so we don't want you to just dive in and solve the more serious ones. The lesser serious things, somebody telling jokes. I would say same thing if you see somebody that's bringing up pornography, actual nude photos and such on their computer, bring that one back to senior management as well. I think that's a more serious thing than just somebody telling a joke or swearing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you know, document the facts: who did what, by who, what, when. You know, gather the details and then report it. So threats or bullying, we don't encourage people to trying to resolve those things on their own. So if somebody feels like they're being threatened or bullied, we don't want them. We want them to come forward and talk to management and get some help to get that resolved right away. The reporting processes can be in writing, in person, can be through a friend. Lots of different ways that we can handle the reporting process, but we don't want it to be anonymous. We don't want someone just to submit in a note without signing it. That doesn't help us. We really can't take action on anonymous type things. It's really hard to, if we don't have anyone standing behind it. We do tell people that we'll keep things as confidential as possible. So this is an important point for supervisors. Don't promise that it'll be totally confidential. And I've had times where somebody will come in to complain and they'll say, I'm going to tell you some problems that's going on, but I don't want anyone to know. And I just immediately say, I will keep it as confidential as possible, but from the moment I'm aware, I have to take action as an organization. If it's happening to you, it's probably happening to someone else, and we've got to take the necessary steps to eliminate it. Let's talk, so. But we want people to understand that all reported violations will be fairly investigated with prompt remedial action. Some situations may warrant, and this is something that we empower you as supervisors, that if you feel like someone needs to go home for the day, then that's fine. You tell them, hey, I want you to take the rest of the day off while we decide next steps from here. I'll give you a call in the morning and we'll talk from there. If you feel like the situation is risky enough and whatever, and you just want to immediately ask someone to go home, do that. But we don't want you to fire them on the spot. We want to, let cooler minds prevail. Let's gather the facts. Let's look at the situation and involve the senior management team with those kinds of things. Okay, well, no retaliation will occur against any employee who reports or participates in witness statements or anything that goes on. What might retaliation look like? Can you think of an example of what retaliation may be?
Like fight, confrontation, calling them.
Yeah, so somebody's picking on somebody else or talking about them, downgrading, especially if it's coming from anyone in management, if we're treating someone differently because they complained or brought it to our attention. What are some other examples of retaliation? Because it's important that we as supervisors understand this, because if we're involved in it, we've got to make sure it's not happening. So we need to be real clear about what it is.
What was that, Kim? Sorry?
Yeah, what are some other examples of retaliation? What might it look like? So somebody comes in and complains about harassment, and then what might retaliation look like? If they're any kind of somebody treating them differently now because they reported.
They file a counter complaint.
Yeah, and if there's some legitimacy, if it's legitimate, then they can, they're welcome to do that. But if somebody's just making up things, or begin teasing them, if they begin talking about them behind their back, if they treat them differently, like maybe they adjust their pay raise, that their raise is lower, they don't get promoted, they don't get the same training opportunities, they get moved to a different location in the office. Those can be all examples of somebody being treated differently because they complained. In the legal world, every time somebody files a case now of discrimination, they automatically add in retaliation as well into those lawsuits. It's interesting that we've seen such a trend to that, because there's a lot of different ways that people retaliate after someone's complained. And so it might be either coming from management or from other employees. And so us as supervisors, we play a really key role in making sure that those things are eliminated and are not happening. All right, so each of us share a responsibility for creating an atmosphere of mutual respect. And it's very critical that we do everything we can to create this positive, productive work environment. And that's really the kind of the bottom line of when we say preventing harassment. This is what we're looking for: is we want a respectful, productive, positive work environment. So if we eliminate the negativity and the unwanted conflict and the disrespect that's taking place and the harassing type behaviors, then we end up with a good mutual respect respectful, positive work environment. If we're being respectful, that means we value the rights and differences and opinions of other people. And and everybody, like I said, we all have things that are different about us. And I hope that through our discussions and training and just even talking about this stuff, that we begin to widen our view and be more accepting of others, be more accepting of some of those differences. The comment was made early on about tattoos. And I hope that people become more accepting of people that have tattoos or body piercing or whatever it is that, that even though you may have some feelings about it, don't treat them differently. It's okay. You don't have to like it, but you can still like the person, and not necessarily the difference. Focus on liking the people, no matter what they do and say, or their differences. So if we're respectful, we work together. We resolve conflicts positively and productively, and we treat others like we want to be treated. Some common sense things here. We allow differences without the judgment or the negativity or backbiting or any of that takes place. We disagree, but we're still respectful. It's okay that we don't have to like everything about it, some individuals, but I can still be respectful to them and work well with them. Ideas are heard and given fair consideration. No personal attacks, backbiting, negativity, no form of harassment like we talked about. So any questions about anything we've talked about here so far?
No.
And most of you, and I apologize, you got hit with a double wrap of some of the same information we went through last week.
Chris should have just been here.
Is Christine, are you back in the room?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you by chance bring in that statement that we had everyone else sign before? Did you have copies of that, or I can actually bring one up?
I didn't bring it in, no.
Okay. Let me open one up here really quick. I think so everyone else saw this except for Chris, or went through this. You know what I'll do, instead of having you all go through that same statement again, we'll just get a copy to Chris. Christina, can you make sure that Chris gets one? And if there's anyone else in here that didn't sign one of those before, let's make sure that we get a signed statement from everybody. And so we've got that as well.
Okay.
Okay, and you'll see in that agreement, so we've had everyone sign this, and this should be part of our regular training process too. Is we have them sign that agreement so they understand what harassment is. They agree not to be involved in harassing others, and they agree to report and eliminate harassment, and that's part of our training process here too. All right, so what's some of your role now in eliminating and preventing harassment? What's different for you? How do you help eliminate this in the workplace?
Your actions.
Yeah, you're the example. So how you respond to all of these things we've talked about, you're going to really be setting the tone. So I mentioned, if you're the one telling the dirty jokes or looking up the inappropriate things on the computer or over teasing or whatever, you may be creating this environment that might escalate and make it even worse. So the opposite of that is walk that higher line. Watch the words you use and the way you behave and the way you're interacting with others, and really make some of those positive changes in the way you work in the work environment. What else? Anything besides being an example that we need to do to prevent harassment?
Quickly investigate any and all claims that are reported.
Okay. Yeah. After we, make sure we're going through our process we talked about. But yes, if you're involved in, so as an organization, any reported harassment, we're going to want to investigate. But I emphasize that your role as the supervisor is is just gather the initial information from that person complaining, and then bring it back to Christina and Basil and help, let them kind of decide next steps from there. And it may be that they'll have you get more information and do the full investigation, but you're right, that's certainly part of it too. Well, part of this too, you're critical in helping to define the expectation. So so we have it written in your employee handbook. So make sure people are receiving and are reading about it there. We have training usually once a year or so make sure that they're attending the training and making sure that people understand. So if you as you're talking to new employees, that's probably one of those policies that would be a good one just to kind of mention. Say, hey, we create a positive work environment here. We're free of harassment. And there's lots of forms of harassment. You may have them read that section, to help them understand that. You're also critical that you're monitoring the work environment, so that you're, how do you do that? How do you monitor the work environment so that you see and know if harassing type stuff is going on out there? What do you do?
Be involved. Communicate.
Okay. And you really need to be accessible too. If you're always in your office with the door shut, you're not going to be involved. You're not going to be accessible. And there are times when you have to have that. We all know that you got to have that quiet time. So just don't be that way all the time. And most of you have probably heard of the management by walking around. It's good to be out and involved and being part of folks. Walk that fine line. We don't want to micromanage and be in everybody's business all the time, but find ways that you're connecting in so that you know what's going on and that people are comfortable talking to you about any issues or questions or problems. Can I say reinforcement here? Take corrective action. So if you hear that inappropriate joke, you see somebody looking at something on the computer they shouldn't be, we need you to immediately either talk to them about that, coach them, giving them the feedback, hey, that's not appropriate, or you're taking the information again back to Christina and Basil.
Okay.
Okay, and then you might be involved in investigations too, so you're gathering the facts and information. We're going to go into a little more detail on investigations in just a minute. You're also really critical in the rumor mill and control and making sure that retaliation doesn't take place. So if you are involved in investigations or somebody has reported a complaint about harassment or there's a witness, what's something I can do with each of those individuals that complain or those who are involved in witnesses to help to control rumors?
Discuss the actual facts.
Yeah, so only talking about facts. And what about once I've talked with them and gathered the information from them? And again, and even everyone I'm talking to, I don't necessarily want to share all the details of everything. I'm just asking their view and what did they see or hear or do, gathering information. But when I'm done talking to them, what should I do to make sure that they don't run out and talk to everybody else about this?
Let them know that you're not going to be tolerated going out, explaining or talking about the situation to other employees.
Yeah, exactly. Point out to them that, this is very confidential, very sensitive information. I need your commitment that you'll not talk to other people about this. Do I have that?
Right.
Look them in the eye and ask for that commitment. This has to stay here. Do I have your commitment that it will? And and then take it from there. So that's one way that we might control the rumor mill. Build teams who respect each other. What are some things that you can do as a supervisor to help people to be respectful of each other?
Well, shouldn't everybody respect each other anyways?
Yeah, they should. We'd love if they did, but what if they're not? Is there some? What might be your role if you see that it's not happening?
Sit them down.
Yeah. So if you see the people that are being disrespectful in how if they're not acting like they're not tolerant of differences, or if they're saying or doing something that's offending or hurting other people, that's probably a good time to bring them into your, in confidence and talking to them about it, helping them, just confront them about what you see and what you heard and how your view is that it was impacting other people. And gather their thoughts and feelings about it, and then ask them to stop doing that behavior or stop saying that statement. So it's also good to do things as a team where you interact and have fun together. It's good to I've seen some organizations where they have huge differences of different cultures, and they may ask people from those different cultures sometimes to come in and share some things about their culture and share some things with the team that helps people to sometimes understanding and information helps people to be more tolerant as well. So just lots of different ideas there, things that you might do. But certainly if you see disrespect or problems, we've got to confront that. What about have you ever seen situations where you see the kind of the nonverbal communication that's taking place? You can tell that somebody's mad that they're mad at each other. What does that kind of look like? They're walking down the hall and they look at each other, and they kind of they may walk the opposite directions. You may you can just kind of feel the tension. Mm-hmm. It might be looks and glares. Might be looking away from the person. So if you see some of that kind of stuff that's taking place, the little nonverbal cues there, what should you do as a supervisor then?
I don't know.
Can you repeat the question, Ken? I'm sorry. We were trying to get this user up and running.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so my question is if you see nonverbal conflict, or that it's obvious that there's two people are upset or angry at each other.
By the looks.
What might you do? Yeah, by the looks. What might you do as a supervisor to help resolve that?
Sit both parties down and try to get to the bottom of what the problem is before it escalates.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would probably start doing it individually. Sometimes if you bring them in together right at the very beginning, that might fester it and make it even worse and escalate into a higher conflict. But if you talk to them individually and say, hey, I noticed that there was tension between you and Roger. What's going on? It just seemed like there was, guys were upset. Are you guys okay? And do that separately, and then meet with Roger. Roger, I noticed that you and Jane seemed like there was tension the other day. What's going on? And and often if I can help them, surface what their concern or problem is, and can help them identify something where they accept some responsibility. If there's something they're sorry about or some problem that they've contributed to it, then if I can bring them together and get them both to share something where they're taking responsibility and saying, hey, I'm sorry, I really shouldn't have said this, then I can get them to resolve the conflict and I get the breakdown. So, and we have some good training guidelines and handouts on that kind of thing. So if you run into that scenario where there's a obvious conflict between employees, get hold of Debbie or myself, and we'll get you that guidelines on how do you handle that kind of discussion and dialogue. But again, sometimes it's those little things that we leave and they fester, and they work into bigger, more challenging things. So it's often better to resolve and deal with those things right up front. All right, so responding to employee reports. So let's go through this again. So so we talked about this a little bit before. What if somebody, so if somebody comes to you and says, and they may not use the word harassment, I'm being harassed. They may say, so-and-so keeps asking me out. Or, you know, hey, so-and-so's teasing me and it's driving me nuts. Or I keep hearing them talk about sexual things, or so-and-so's bringing up pornography on their computer. I mean, more likely it's going to look like that. So when somebody's talking to you about those kind of things, what do you do?
I go to Lewis and tell him to stop.
Say that again?
I go to Lewis and tell him to stop.
Okay.
I think I take down their statement and listen to what they have to say and then ask the other person.
Yeah, so gather the information. You know, so while they're there, put on your listening ears and ask probing questions. What happened? When did it happen? Were there witnesses? Get all the details and document it. Right? Write all of those things down. Let them know that hey, I'm going to, we take these kinds of things serious. We appreciate you bringing this to our attention. I ask that you keep this confidential. Give us some time to. We'll keep this as confidential as possible, a need-to-know only basis, and I'd ask you to do the same. Don't go talk to other employees or others about this. Let us resolve this so that we can eliminate that. And and from there, bring it back to Christina and Basil, and just let them decide the next steps together with you, as opposed to diving in and investigating. But investigation might be the next steps, but So take all reports serious. Don't just say, oh, that's just the way Joe is. Just don't worry about it. Take it serious. Find a place to talk about it in confidence. Gather the basic facts: who did what and when. Notify HR or senior management as soon as possible. So I'm talking about more any of these kinds of complaint type situations. If it's something that's a relatively simple thing, like somebody telling questionable jokes or that kind of thing, then I would say go ahead and just talk to them and coach them on that, solve those kind. But all these other scenarios that appear risky, bring that back to Christina and Basil, and let's talk about kind of next steps from there. Okay, questions or comments about that?
Nope.
All right, so from there we'll jointly plan an investigation and next steps. And now let's go into investigations, because some of you might be involved in conducting investigations. There's a number of things that we want to make sure we're doing here to handle this correctly. One is we got to get right on it. As soon as we get the information, we find out something's happening. We got to get the information while it's fresh on everyone's minds and what's going on. We got to go at this fair and thorough, but we've got to make sure that we're not forming an opinion. If you start your review and investigation and you're already viewing somebody as guilty, that's what you're going to find what you're looking for. So you've got to go at this with a real open mind and really look for the facts, as if you're kind of like an impartial judge, impartial third party that's just trying to gather the information. You're going to interview witnesses, and and we have to make sure that we're controlling the witnesses, as I've mentioned. A need-to-know only basis. We finish the discussion with each of those witnesses by letting them know this is strictly confidential. We need to keep a positive work environment. Do I have your commitment that you'll not share our discussion or anything we talked about with anyone else? I mean, I'd actually ask them, do I have your promise and your commitment? Look them in the eye. I want them to say it. I want the words to come out of their mouth. I don't want to just say, I don't want you to go talk to anyone. I want to hear them see their head nod and them agree to it. But I can't emphasize enough about keeping that open mind, because if you're closed-minded and you've made your final judgment before you're even starting, you're not going to be as impartial and gather the information correctly. Let people know you'll keep it as confidential as possible, and make sure you're doing the same. I emphasize that. Don't go around and talk to other supervisors or other employees about the information or what's going on. If somebody comes up to you and asks about it, just say, sorry, yeah, I'm involved in a confidential review, and I can't talk about it. But make sure you're documenting all of your findings too. I mean, if any of you have been involved in these kinds of things, it's hard to, you get a lot of information, a lot of different things that people say. Everybody has their own perspective and on things, and I write down as much detail as I can. Sometimes I've been involved in several situations, legal situations where I've done investigations, and sometimes there's years before they're fully resolved. And if you don't take detailed enough notes, it's hard to remember everything. It really is. We just move on, and so you've got to take really meticulous notes in these kinds of things. Consider taking intermittent actions. So there may be situations where the situation is risky enough that we may want to actually ask the person to take a few days off while we gather the information, decide next steps, and that's an okay approach that we might take as a management group. Ultimately, we need to reach a conclusion, and that's a challenge sometimes. I got to tell you, I've had times where both, I had a situation one time where an individual had been accused of actually, making several sexual comments and actually touching, and he completely denied it, and I had no witnesses. He just says, "Wow, she must really like me or something," or it just in my gut, I felt like that he was lying, but I didn't know. I just didn't have the evidence to show it. And I went back to the person who had complained, and I shared with her that the challenge we were having, with that there were no witnesses, that that his statement was completely opposite. And I said, "What is it that you would like to have happen here?" She says, "Ken, I just want it to stop." And so I says, "What if I have him, and I says, what if I move his location, if I move him, and what if I have him sign a statement, that what this is, and that he'll avoid doing all of these things? Would that be, I mean, I don't always have to do this approach, but I'm just giving an example. Sometimes, when you got to reach a conclusion, it's difficult. And in this particular situation, that's what we ended up doing, is we concluded that we weren't completely sure if harassment had taken place, but to be sure, we had the accused person, we had him sign a statement that he would not do any of these things. We moved his location, and then it stopped. At least I could demonstrate that if somebody, an outside party, came in and said, "Did you take actions?" we could demonstrate, yes, we did an investigation. We took actions to make sure it wouldn't happen again. All right, and then communicate the decision. Make sure you're communicating with the person that complained, and as well as the accused. I think those two individuals, I don't know that you have to go back to every other witness and said, "Here's what the final outcome was." But definitely the person that was accused and the person who complained, and let them know, here's what we've decided to do, and here's the actions we've taken. Then I emphasize one last step here, which is follow-up. Check back with that person who complained a couple of weeks later, and say, "Hey, are things going okay now? How are things now? Has everything been fine?" Especially, we have to be careful that they're not being retaliated against now from others, or that others are treating them differently, or anything that's going on. We have to, so make sure you're kind of watching that closely and checking back with that person, making sure that it's eliminated and that retaliation's not taking place. So some common mistakes that happen during investigations, trying to be right instead of reasonable. A lot of times some people, they go in at this, and they're really focused on finding proving that something is right, instead of sometimes the answer is just not completely black and white. Agreeing to keep it between you and me, I've mentioned that one already. Hey, I'll keep this just between you and I. We can't do that. We'll keep it as confidential as possible, need-to-know only basis. Not getting things in writing. One of the things I'd recommend is, too, when someone comes into you and complains, so after you gather the information from them and you talk to them and you probe and get the information details, I would ask them, say, I would like you to go back and put in writing for me what it is that that's happened, what your concern is. And please put that in writing and define for me any witnesses, any evidence, information that you have, and ask them to put that in writing. Make sure you're not leading the witnesses. And so I might. So when I go to a witness, I don't want to put words in their mouth, and I start out really general. So let's say that, for example, I talked about Roger and Jane, and maybe Jane had complained that Roger was doing some inappropriate things, and she maybe she gave me a witness. She said, "Yeah, talk to Judy. She heard him say this." So when I'm talking now to Judy, I don't want to go in and immediately say, "Hey, I heard that that Roger said this and this. Did you hear it?" That's leading the witness. Instead, what I would do is go in and say, "Hey, Judy, I want to talk to you in confidence about something that's going on. I'd heard that there was some sort of discussion that went on between Roger and Jane the other day. Can you tell me about it? Did you hear anything? What went on? Was there anything that was questionable or possibly inappropriate that you heard?" So I'm letting them bring forth the information. I'm not putting the words in their mouth. Now, at some point in that discussion with Judy, if I'm really not getting out all the facts and the exact details, and maybe Jane said, "Hey, he said this," at some point I might say, "At any point in that conversation, did you hear Roger say this?" And I may say that statement, and then I'll get their confirmation whether they heard it or not. But I wouldn't start with that, and I don't leave and put the words in their mouth. But at some point, I may want that confirmation: did you or did you not hear this? And and then that helps you to get better information. All right, making legal conclusions. So a legal conclusion here might be an example where someone says, well, yes, that's sexual harassment. Sexual harassment occurred. A better approach in documenting and a better way of handling it is that company policy was violated, and here were the specific offenses that took place. That way we're not labeling something as harassment that may come back later on and hurt us in some sort of court of law thing or whatever. All we're saying is, we've reached a conclusion that they have violated policy, and here were the specific actions that we saw and heard, and this is why, and here's the actions that we've taken to eliminate this, or the corrective action taken. Questions or comments about any of this?
Nope.
First on.
Okay. All right, so we've talked about some of your roles. We've talked about harassment, what harassment is. We've talked about doing investigations. Sometimes we have to be careful that, don't assume that everything's okay just because no one's complained. So we've got to make sure we're looking out at those nonverbals that are going on out in the workplace. Other things that might be happening that's saying, yeah, there are problems. You see two people avoiding each other. You see tensions between each other. That's where I say, bring them in one at a time. Talk to the person. Hey, is everything going okay? Only allow employees to say and do things that are appropriate. So make sure you're enforcing things out there. Know what the expectations are yourself. So that's part of why we do the training, to make sure that you're clear, they're clear on what is or what should not take place. Reinforce the expectations. Let the punishment fit the crime. So if someone's just telling a questionable joke, maybe just consulting and confronting them and telling them to stop, and then document that, is enough. If it's actually somebody touching or somebody being really, doing some serious harassing kind of things, come back to the management team, and we may decide that they actually need to be terminated for it. Okay, so lots of different things there. So in creating the mutual respect, we talked about being an example, making sure you're encouraging others to be respectful with each other, helping people value differences, being open to to their opinions and backgrounds and others. Doing team building with others is helpful. Resolve unresolved conflicts so that we eliminate those things as well. Remember, you're held to a higher standard than other employees. You have to walk the line and do things even better than others. So set that tone of mutual respect and common courtesy. Don't date or pursue sexual relations with other employees that report to you. And make sure you've got a good rapport and relationship with employees so that they're comfortable coming to you. And then make sure you're protecting their privacy, keeping things as confidential as possible. So those are just all some good, important reminders. All right, so we've already hit all of this. Know what harassment is, respond to everything, encourage employees to follow the policy, report complaints to senior management, HR. Let's go in. Now, I wonder, we've got about 30 minutes left here. Should we take a 5-minute break?
Yes.
No, let's just go through it.
No, we need a break. I have to go to, I do too.
You have to smoke a cigarette.
No, I have to use the men's room. I've been
what discrimination is, and make sure that we're eliminating any form of discrimination in the work environment. We'll cover both briefly Title VII of the Civil Rights Act as well as the California FEHA and some of the specifics involved in that. So there's two forms of discrimination. There's what's called disparate treatment or disparate impact, and one is intentional and the other is unintentional. And both forms are protected and covered in the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act that prevent all forms of discrimination in employment practices. So if you look at various employment practices I have listed here, you've got such things as any advertisements, so help wanted ads, the way we post the ad, we can't sound like we're discriminating. Our job applications, the way we're screening, the way we interview, the way we hire, the promoting, transferring, terminating, working conditions, training, all of these things are employment decisions, and we can't discriminate or whether intentional or unintentional, the way that we treat people based on race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, marital status, national origin, ancestry, disability, age, request for family medical leave, or for their own health issue or pregnancies. So all of these things, and I'm kind of grouping some of these two together here. So it's important that we as supervisors are careful in the way that we're making our various decisions each day. So a lot of you are involved in interviewing. So make sure you're never asking questions about someone's medical conditions or pregnancy or plans to have babies or anything about their race, color, religion, sexual orientation. All of those kinds of questions need to stay out of the interviewing process. And I would leave them out of our daily discussions as well. This goes back to our discussions about preventing harassment. It also applies in the way we make decisions and such. We have to leave all of that kind of information out and not even imply that we're making decisions, or we may create risk of the organization being sued. Questions about what is or is not discrimination, and things that we need to make sure that we're doing as leaders in the employment decisions we make. Any questions about this?
no.
Pretty straightforward, and this is something we've heard before. It's just always a good reminder for us to make sure that we're being careful. So now I'm just going to go through a couple of the provisions of the California FEHA just to make sure that we're all clear on some of that. Before I do, I also wanted to mention the Americans with Disabilities Act. This is another sensitive area. And this prohibits any discrimination based on someone's being disabled, and they have to be able to perform the essential functions of the job with or without reasonable accommodation. So we may have situations where if you're approached by an employee and they're asking for some special consideration or some issue going on with their job, same thing there. We want you to listen to them, gather the facts. What are they requesting, and then bring it back to Christina and Basil, and then let's, as a management team, we'll guide you on what to do and next steps. Same thing if somebody comes in and says, hey, I think I've got a disability, or I need some sort of accommodation here. find out what it is that they want, and then there's a process that we'll go through. You know, there's what's called an interactive dialogue, and we'll guide. You know, they may involve HR service in some of these kinds of situations. You know, if somebody has that. But if you're faced with that, your role as the supervisor is just, you know, just make sure, one, that you're not making any decisions about somebody's disability, and then if you have something that you want to consider a accommodation for, or if somebody's been out for 3 days or more, or they're out on a maternity leave, or they're out on a medical problem issue, bring that back to the attention of Christina and Basil so that we know and are aware we may have some situation where we need to offer them Family Medical Leave Act rights, and so we may need to communicate that to them as well. And if ever there's any questions or problems with any of this, always feel free to call either Debbie Sidaway or myself at HR Service, and we'll guide you and help you on this. But I just wanted to briefly mention this Americans Disability Act, and I've also mentioned the Family Medical Leave Act, and then, you know, and then California has their own family medical leave. You know, so we just have to handle those things very delicately. You know, when somebody leaves on, in fact, that leads us into this next discussion. If somebody has a pregnancy or a medical condition or those kinds of things, we have to make sure we're handling those things very carefully. And that leads us into, these are some of the California guaranteed leave rights and responsibilities that we have to be careful of. So they're guaranteed that if somebody is viewed as being, if they're they have leave if they're disabled because of pregnancy, we have to allow them that kind of leave. That we have to, they're guaranteed that we'll make some sort of reasonable accommodations for pregnancy. The birth or adoption of a child for the employee's own serious health condition, or to care for a parent, spouse, or child with a serious condition. Again, we have to consider and accommodate those kinds of things. They're protected from any retaliation for filing a complaint, or if they're worried if they're in violation of any of these.
She's not legally adopted. The 3 kids are from Cambodia can take leave.
And do you have a real situation we wanted to?
No, I just said that I can take leave if I adopt these 3 children from Cambodia, because adoption.
Mm-hmm.
See ya.
Yeah, there you go. I'm going to go adopt some kids so I can go on vacation.
That would still apply, Ken?
That would still apply.
Yeah, but it would not be a vacation, let me tell you.
No. I'm just saying, in general, would that fall under the guaranteed leave and rights if you adopt a child or children?
Yes. Yes, same thing there. So we have to accommodate either the birth or the adoption of children.
Oh, God.
So they have some leave rights there as well.
Right.
Okay.
That didn't work.
So we have to be willing to make reasonable accommodation when necessary in order for them to perform their jobs. You know, so we talked a little bit about that under the disability. So that's kind of a quick and dirty of everything that we've talked about. So just to review, we went through what is harassment. We talked about your critical role as leaders to not only resolving things on your own, but to make sure you're gathering information and bringing it back to senior management to make the next calls and resolve things from there. We talked about your playing the critical role of not only being the example, but you're monitoring the work environment, you're holding people accountable, you're communicating expectations, you're giving them feedback, you know, if they're violating any of these things, and you'll be involved in investigations. Possibly. It may be that senior management decides someone else is going to do the investigation, but again, you're gather that information and bring it back. We have to make sure that we're being careful whenever we're approached for things for requests for leave or time off, especially related to medical conditions, pregnancies, anything that might fall under any of these rights that we've just talked about, or requests for accommodations for disabilities. If you run into any of those situations, we want you just to, again, gather the information. What is it they want? What are they requesting? Bring it back to senior management, and then they'll take guidance and provide assistance from there. Okay, so any other questions or comments about anything we've talked about today?
No.
Well, thank you all very much. That wraps up our official training on harassment and discrimination. And it was very good chatting with everyone here today. I hope you guys all have a nice rest of the week.
You too. Thanks, Ken.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.